The WNYC studio in Albany was gripped by an almost palpable stillness the moment First Lady Melania Trump entered, her presence commanding immediate, profound silence from everyone. Dressed in a striking navy coat dress and cream heels, she offered only a fleeting, almost imperceptible nod to the floor manager and a hushed good afternoon that barely disturbed the ambient hum of the set. Her appearance on the political panel was a rare event, a significant news story in itself, especially since the commencement of her husband's second term. This bipartisan discussion, ostensibly about civility in modern politics, had already captured a vast audience, eagerly anticipating the impending spectacle. Yet, the true catalyst for the escalating drama was seated just a few chairs away. Congresswoman Jasmine Crocket of Texas. Jasmine was an unyielding force, utterly devoid of caution. Young, acutely perceptive, and frequently explosive at the microphone, she had carved out a reputation by audaciously challenging what she perceived as performative leadership, particularly from those she believed evaded accountability. Her sharp critiques had recently edged ever closer to the First Lady, though she had never directly named her. The studio itself was a tableau of stark modernity: deep gray walls, sleek glass desks, and logos emanating a cool, blue luminescence. For panelists, a moderator, and cameras moved with an almost predatory slowness. There was no live audience, yet millions watched, their breaths held captive from their homes. From the very outset, an unspoken tightness permeated the room, not overt tension, but meticulously controlled atmosphere. Steve Barkley, the seasoned broadcaster from Rochester, initiated the discussion with deceptively innocuous questions. What does political civility even mean anymore? Can disagreements still coexist with respect? Melania's responses were concise, flawlessly polished. We should speak with purpose, not noise, she articulated, adding, real strength is not loud. Jasmine's eyebrows arched, just perceptibly enough for the home audience to notice, as she retorted, sometimes noise is the only thing people hear after being ignored for too long. A ripple of laughter, not universal but distinct, spread through the room. This established the unsettling rhythm for the next 20 minutes. Jasmine's quick and incisive words juxtaposed with Melania's measured, glacial replies. No direct interruptions, no overt arguments, yet an undeniable undercurrent of conflict steadily intensified. When pressed on whether the White House had contributed to the inflamed political climate, Melania's calm declaration was chilling. I cannot be responsible for how others react to words, only for my own. Jasmine, without missing a beat, countered, but silence is a reaction too. There were no shouts, no histrionics, just a slow-burning intensity that most viewers would only fully grasp much later. What remained unknown to everyone, even the panelists, was the small green light on the microphone control board, which had shifted from red to yellow, indicating the wireless mics were still active, still broadcasting. We'll take a quick commercial break, the moderator announced. Stay with us. The cameras reseated, and the broadcast dissolved into black. And then, the true drama began. The stage lights softened, signaling the interlude. Crew members moved with hushed efficiency, adjusting earpieces, distributing water bottles. Yet, the air remained charged, thick with the unspoken, like the space between two individuals who had conveyed too much without uttering a single direct accusation. Melania Trump reclined, legs elegantly crossed, hands neatly folded in her lap. Her gaze consciously avoided Jasmine Crocket, but a subtle shift in her posture betrayed a deeper intention. Less prepared for the lens, more deliberately poised. Jasmine had turned slightly towards the moderator, sharing an off-mic laugh with another panelist. Then Melania leaned in. Not an ostentatious movement, merely a slight tilt of her head, closing the spatial gap by a few inches. What followed was not loud. It didn't need to be. You should be careful who you call out, she murmured. Her accent pronounced, her voice dangerously low. Some of us never forget. Jasmine's response was not immediate. Her eyes blinked once, slowly, before she calmly rotated her head, like a chess player contemplating their next move. "Oh," she said, her tone deceptively light, her expression utterly devoid of warmth. "That's supposed to scare me." Melania's smile was faint, unreadable, neither inviting nor hostile, leaving one to ponder its true intent: a threat, a caution, or something far more enigmatic. Neither woman raised her voice, yet the entire exchange was captured, crystal clear, on the backup audio feed in the control booth. Recording off-air segments was not standard protocol, but recent pressures from network executives, coupled with the high-profile guests, had prompted some producers to do so as a precautionary measure. Angela Russo, a junior editor relegated to night shifts with minimal clearance for the panel broadcast, was the first to hear it. While reviewing live tape, the line played through her headphones. She froze, rewound the last 30 seconds, and listened again. Initial confusion gave way to a chilling realization. Was this worth flagging? Was she even permitted to listen? But the impulse to act was too strong. She saved the clip, a mere 20 seconds of raw audio, and sent it to a friend. Within 40 minutes, that friend, a verified account notorious for breaking early political gossip, unleashed a tweet: "Hot mic moment. Melania Trump whispers something to Representative Jasmine Crocket during commercial break. Leak audio. Decide for yourself." And there it was, a shaky phone recording of an editing bay screen, the panelists frozen in mid-break, and the chilling words: "You should be careful who you call out." Some of us never forget. Ringing clear. Twitter ignited first, then TikTok, then the clips swept across Facebook and conservative forums. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag #HotMechMelania. Hashtag never forget. Hashtag careful Jasmine, and the more sardonic hashtag civility queen. Every breath, every syllable was dissected. Was it a threat? A warning? Was this the true voice of the First Lady when she believed herself unobserved? Within hours, mainstream media picked up the scent. CNN aired the audio 3 times in one segment. Fox devoted an entire hour to it. MSNBC brought in linguists to dissect the phrasing and tone. But the impact transcended mere words. It was about the recipient. Jasmine Crocket had forged her brand on uncompromising directness, refusing to soften her language or shy away from confrontation. The question now was not just Melania's transgression, but Jasmine's inevitable response. The internet, however, had no patience for answers. It polarized, and it moved with breakneck speed. By midnight, the clip had amassed over 8 million views. It wasn't merely the whisper, it was the entire volatile context, the controlled tone, the precise timing, the historical undercurrents. Political TikTok was deluged with split-screen reactions, voiceovers, and edits set to ominous music. Instagram meme pages began plastering screenshots of Melania's sidelong glance with captions like "threat level, Slovenian ice." Others framed Jasmine's response as a battle cry. Everyone had an opinion, some humorous, some incandescent with rage. Cable news scrambled to keep pace. By the following morning, 3 national outlets had plastered updated banners on their homepages. One blared, "First Lady's hot mic moment sparks firestorm." Another, "Crockett versus Trump, mic'd up and unfiltered." Talk radio plunged into the fray. A conservative AM station in Tulsa argued Melania had simply offered a personal reminder to maintain respect. A liberal podcaster countered, "If a man said that, we'd call it a threat. Let's not pretend whispering makes it polite." But what truly propelled the incident into the stratosphere was Jasmine herself. No formal statement, no press release, no interview. Just a tweet. Some people hide behind quiet voices. I don't. 10 words. No names, no hashtags, just raw, potent implication. It was a digital grenade. By the time the sun climbed over Fort Worth, her hometown, supporters were already mobilizing, both symbolically and literally. Local outlets clamored for interviews with her team. Former interns offered background quotes, asserting Jasmine's unsurprised reaction, her long history of challenging such veiled power dynamics. Simultaneously, Melania's press office maintained an impenetrable silence. Not a single statement to clarify or deny. This amplified the public outcry. One faction demanded, "Why won't she explain herself?" The other declared she owed no apology. And caught in the middle were millions, observing this unscripted drama unfold, torn between outrage and a reluctant admiration. Jasmine, outwardly composed, was a maelstrom of activity behind the scenes. Messages flooded in by the hundreds, some menacing, some deeply emotional, some simply bewildered. Her press secretary, Dion Shields, slept on the office floor for 2 consecutive nights, struggling to manage the deluge of responses and potential threats. For once such a story breaks, it transcends mere sound bites. People claim ownership, projecting their frustrations, their personal narratives, their very identities onto it. "I've been silenced like that," one woman wrote to Jasmine, "like I didn't belong in the room. Thank you for showing you don't need to shrink." Jasmine reread that message twice. She hadn't sought this kind of spotlight, at least not like this, but she was not one to retreat when it found her. Melania, meanwhile, remained conspicuously quiet. Some interpreted her silence as strategic, others as an admission of guilt. Her defenders championed it as dignity. Her critics condemned it as calculated. Regardless, it was this very quietude that amplified the uproar. TV networks hastily assembled panels of psychologists, body language experts, and former political aides, all striving to decipher Melania's tone. A few posited a personal vendetta, a grudge from an undisclosed past disagreement. Others ventured it was a fluke, that Melania was simply venting politely, unaware her mic was hot. But this theory crumbled under scrutiny. The deliberate lean, the precise timing. It reeked of premeditation. Then, from out of nowhere, a reporter from the Portland Tribune dropped a bombshell that irrevocably altered the conversation. An anonymous source at the event confirmed Melania had specifically requested her seat not be near Representative Crockett. It wasn't a forceful demand, but the preference had been meticulously noted in an internal email that subsequently leaked. Now, the questions escalated, not just what Melania meant, but what she had planned. Yet, beneath the cacophony, another listener, with motives of their own, was preparing to unleash more. Jasmine Crocket was no stranger to pressure. She had endured brutal primaries where every dollar was a battle, debates where a microphone inexplicably failed, and interviews where hosts attempted to corner her with condescending gotcha questions. Her tone had always been sharp, her answers even sharper. But this felt fundamentally different. She sat in her apartment the night after the storm broke, transfixed by the muted television, every channel ceaselessly looping the clip. That same unsettling whisper, that same fleeting glimpse of Melania's eyes, and then Jasmine's tweet, now quoted as a rallying cry. She sipped cold coffee, her phone a constant, vibrating beacon, illuminating like a pinball machine. Texts from her staff, calls from donors, even celebrity invitations to go live on Instagram. But Jasmine wasn't ready to play that game. Not yet. Across the room, Dion sat on the floor, laptop open, scrolling through news feeds and filtering social mentions. Her voice was calm, but her eyes darted with frantic speed. "You're trending again," she reported, without looking up. #2 in the U.S., only behind the NFL scandal. Jasmine let out a dry, mirthless laugh. "Guess I should thank her." Dion finally looked up. "You don't have to respond. You already said your piece." 10 words, Jasmine murmured. "That's all it takes now." She rose and moved to the window. The streets of Arlington below were quiet. Cars gliding through intersections, people carrying takeout bags, teenagers smoking under a flickering streetlight. Normal life, yet hers was anything but. She replayed the panel in her mind. The exact second Melania leaned in. The way it felt less casual, more like a meticulously rehearsed line, delivered with just enough sweetness to obfuscate its true intent. It hadn't precisely scared her, but it had unearthed something ancient within her. When Jasmine was 15, her English teacher had pulled her aside after class. "You might want to dial it back. People aren't used to that kind of energy from someone like you." The teacher hadn't said black or girl, but Jasmine had heard it all the same. Now, years later, it felt like that moment again, amplified and broadcast to an entire nation. Her phone buzzed again, this time displaying a name she hadn't seen in years, Ruthie Miles. They had interned together in 2010, before Jasmine pursued law school and Ruthie ventured into a D.C. consulting firm. Ruthie possessed a razor-sharp memory and an unyielding candor. Jasmine hadn't spoken to her since she moved to Seattle. "Girl," Ruthie said immediately, "you need to be careful." "Nice to hear from you, too," Jasmine replied, a weary smile in her voice. "I'm serious. You know they're going to twist this, right? They're already spinning it like you baited her." "I didn't even say anything," Jasmine countered. "That's the point," Ruthie said. "You didn't have to. You're a target now. Not just politically, personally. These folks play long. You should have seen what they did to my client when she went after a senator's wife." Jasmine sank onto the couch, her eyes fixed on nothing. "You think she meant it as a threat?" A pause, then Ruthie's voice, slow and deliberate. "I think she said exactly what she wanted to say. And I think you scared her without even trying." The call ended shortly after, but Ruthie's words lingered with Jasmine. "You scared her." Perhaps that was the crux of it. The next day, reporters swarmed Capitol Hill, staking out committee rooms and parking lots. They pressed everyone for a formal response from Jasmine, some even inquiring if she would file a complaint. But she bypassed the press for now. Instead, she penned a letter, not to Melania, not to the media, but to her constituents. Handwritten, scanned, and then posted, it declared, "I was elected to speak truth, not to whisper behind cameras. I will not change that because of power or position. If that's loud, then so be it." The post went instantly viral. Thousands shared it. Celebrities reposted it. But what resonated most were the comments from ordinary people: teachers, nurses, grandmothers, young girls. "You're the reason I started paying attention," one wrote. "This gave me chills," another. "My daughter printed this and taped it to her mirror." Jasmine wasn't seeking headlines. She was reclaiming her own narrative. Yet, the silence from Melania's camp was far from accidental. And someone within the network had already begun unearthing the true origins of the tension. The public perceived the broadcast as the beginning of the conflict. It was not. It had started over a year earlier at a private charity fundraiser in Naples, Florida. A hushed affair at a waterfront estate owned by one of the Southeast's wealthiest donors. No cameras, no press, just invitation-only guests, gleaming silver, and discreet conversations. Jasmine, only a few months into her congressional term, hadn't even intended to attend until her chief of staff revealed the guest list. "It's worth the trip," he'd urged. "High rollers, some bipartisan names. You'll make connections." At the time, Jasmine was championing a healthcare bill to expand community clinics in underserved neighborhoods, a bill stalled in committee, desperately needing leverage. She arrived in a teal blazer, talking points clutched in her hand, prepared to shake hands. What she didn't anticipate was Melania Trump. The First Lady rarely appeared at non-White House events without her press entourage, but that night, she arrived with only 2 aides and an almost chillingly serene presence that instantly hushed the room. They didn't speak immediately, not until dessert, when they found themselves standing near the same white marble bar, waiting for drinks. Jasmine wasn't looking for a confrontation. She offered a polite, measured hello. Melania responded with a faint smile. "Congresswoman," she acknowledged with a slight nod. "You know, my district has one of the highest uninsured rates in the state," Jasmine said, almost casually. "I was hoping to talk to some of the donors tonight about supporting our expansion." Melania remained impassive. "That is your work?" "Yes," she stated, "health clinics." Jasmine noted the subtle emphasis. "That is your work." "I believe in solving real problems, ma'am," she replied, still calm, her smile unwavering. Melania held her gaze for a beat too long. "Some people smile, some people shout. It does not mean one is more sincere." A loaded pause, then Melania added, "But if you plan to build influence, maybe you learn which tone the room prefers." This was the pivotal moment. It didn't go viral, didn't make headlines, but it was the seed. Jasmine offered no immediate response that night. She simply walked away. but she remembered every single word. After the fundraiser, she confided in Dion, "If I ever see her in public again and she tries that tone with me, I swear I won't let it slide." It wasn't rage. It was a cold, calculated resolve. Jasmine had encountered women like Melania her entire life. Women who wore polish like armor, who had mastered the art of wielding elegance as a weapon. They weren't harmless, just harder to pin down. So, when Jasmine saw her name on the WNYT panel list months later, something stirred within her. Not panic, not excitement, but a quiet, heightened awareness. They hadn't spoken since Naples, but the memory lingered, a persistent ghost. That's why, when Melania whispered that line during the break, it didn't feel random. It felt like a meticulously rehearsed callback. You should be careful who you call out, as if that charity night had never concluded, as if Melania had patiently waited an entire year to deliver the concluding line of an unresolved conversation. And now, in the aftermath of the hot mic incident, Jasmine's memory of Naples fueled her resolve even further. She realized something profound. Melania hadn't been warning her out of fear. She had been delivering a chilling reminder. You're still not welcome in certain rooms. What Jasmine didn't know, what remained confined to a small network circle, was that Melania had invoked her name more than once in private meetings. Not an overt attack, but subtle, insidious questions. Is she too combative? Do her remarks help anyone? Why must she always make things about confrontation? These soft critiques didn't sound like direct assaults, yet they resonated in the right circles, frequently enough to sow quiet seeds of doubt. Someone at the network had caught wind of these hushed conversations, a mid-level executive named Riley Sharp. He had years of experience with political panels and an intuitive grasp of underlying tensions. After the hot mic incident exploded, Riley began meticulously scrutinizing internal emails, production notes, and even panelist seating requests. And there it was, buried within Melania's team's original list of preferences. Do not seat next to Representative Crockett if avoidable. It wasn't a red flag, wasn't even strictly enforced, but it spoke volumes. But Riley wasn't the only one digging, and someone else had just unearthed the true source of a leak. The clip hadn't simply leaked. It wasn't a glitch or a technical error. It was a deliberate act. Angela Russo, 29, a part-time assistant editor, barely 6 months into her contract at WNYT, worked graveyard shifts. Her duties involved prepping highlight reels, trimming interviews, and syncing audio before broadcasts were archived. Her desk was relegated to the back corner of a second-floor editing bay, where the windows were sealed shut and the vending machine remained perpetually unstocked. She had no intention of becoming the story. Angela had been raised in Passaic, New Jersey, by a single mother who toiled double shifts at a supermarket. Her interest in broadcast journalism had blossomed in high school, sparked not by politics, but by the power of a well-edited moment to stir public emotion. Lately, however, other concerns had begun to gnaw at her. The consistent burying of truths, how powerful voices could manipulate narratives behind closed doors, unheard by the public until it was too late. She had witnessed it countless times, footage suppressed, edited out, or simply ignored. She didn't consider herself an activist, but that night, as Melania's voice echoed through her headphones, something within her recoiled. Angela was syncing backup audio to video timestamps when the words resonated. You should be careful who you call out. Some of us never forget. She stopped, rewound, and listened again. It wasn't explosive, wasn't overt, but it was undeniably intentional. Angela surveyed the empty editing bay, save for an overnight graphics, in turn slumped asleep with headphones on. She clipped the audio, extracted the moment from the live feed backup, added subtitles for her own clarity, and then sat, staring at it for 15 agonizing minutes, her gut churning. This transcended mere politics. It was about power. She recognized that insidious tone, the same she'd heard when her mother was denied a raise, the same way someone had once told Angela she lacked the calm demeanor for an on-air role. She uploaded the clip to a private folder and sent it to one person. Her roommate, Jade, a freelancer for a political YouTube channel. They had a silent pact. reveal the truth when no one else would. But Angela hadn't anticipated the ensuing firestorm. Jade forwarded it to a mutual friend, who sent it to someone with a coveted blue check mark, and before midnight, it had permeated every digital platform. From her bedroom couch, Angela watched, hands trembling, mind racing, as the internet ignited around her tiny video. The next morning, the station convened a closed-door meeting. No names were uttered, yet everyone knew. Whoever released internal footage outside of protocol, the director of production announced, violated our media security policy. This could result in termination and legal action. Angela sat in silence, neither ashamed nor proud, just acutely aware. Later that evening, a text arrived from an unknown number. Respect what you did. Don't talk to press. Don't trust the silence. No name, no follow-up. Jade urged her to wipe her computer. Angela changed her passwords, deleted the folder, but refused to back down. Something fundamental had shifted. In the hours after the leak, WNYT was deluged with over 3,000 calls. Some threatening, some demanding, some lauding. Internal chaos erupted. Sponsors raised questions. Executives began reviewing contracts and exposure risks. Someone, somewhere in the upper echelons, understood the urgent need to manage the fallout. That's when Riley Sharp, the executive producer with the understated demeanor and a perpetual Diet Coke in hand, quietly requested a review of the editing logs. He saw Angela's name, paused, then closed the folder. He didn't escalate it, for Riley had heard the whisper too, and he had his own compelling reasons to maintain silence, for now. Meanwhile, outside the studio, the public's fascination with Jasmine and Melania continued, but new threads began to emerge, turning attention towards the how and why of the leak. If this was what had been caught, what else remained unspoken, unplayed? But politics moves at a dizzying pace, and before anyone could uncover the full truth, Washington had already begun its chilling reaction. By the time the House convened 2 days later, a palpable shift permeated the floor, a direct consequence of the ripple effect caused by the broadcast across the country. The whispers hadn't remained confined to the editing bay or Twitter threads. They had permeated Congress, cable news war rooms, and the hush corners of Capitol Hill, where clandestine deals were brokered over lukewarm coffee and unfinished paperwork. Jasmine Crocket entered the chamber in a deep burgundy suit, her expression unreadable. She moved with her characteristic focus. But this time, the stares were sharper, some curious, some admiring, a few tight-lipped and frigid. She took her seat without a word. On the opposite side of the aisle, Congressman Brent Allward from Kansas rose just before the vote on a defense spending amendment. He didn't mention her by name. He didn't have to. I think we need to remember what real civility looks like, he intoned. That includes how we speak in private as well as in public. Heads turned towards Jasmine. She didn't flinch. Later that day, reporters cornered her in the rotunda. "Congresswoman, do you think the First Lady should apologize?" She smiled, but only with her eyes. "I think the First Lady knows exactly what she said." Then she continued walking. Back at the White House, Melania maintained her public silence. Yet sources close to the East Wing confirmed her disappointment in the overreaction, and her wish for the conversation to have remained focused on the real issues. A few staffers leaked internal notes suggesting the First Lady's team believed Jasmine had exaggerated a private comment for public gain. But they drastically underestimated the story's uncontrollable spiral. Cable panels transformed it into a nightly debate. Was Melania's remark calculated or careless? Did Jasmine seize the moment, or did the moment find her? Even late-night hosts joined the fray. One compared the exchange to a Scorsese movie with better lighting. Another quipped, "If you're going to throw shade, maybe check if the mic is on." But for Jasmine, this wasn't about comedy or strategy. It was about principle. She convened a closed-door meeting with her communications team. Dion sat beside her, scrolling through live coverage, while Jasmine stood before a whiteboard. "We don't need to drag it out," Jasmine asserted, "but we're not going to ignore it either. If we don't speak, they'll fill in the blanks for us." Dion looked up. "What are you thinking?" Jasmine paused. "An op-ed. Something real, something honest. No fire, just clarity. By noon the next day, the Charlotte Standard published the piece online, starkly titled, "Words in the Dark Still Have Power." In it, Jasmine didn't rehash the incident or name Melania. Instead, she wrote about the profound meaning of being spoken to in rooms where people typically speak about you. She wrote about tone, about warnings disguised as advice, about the silent, insidious movements of power. I've learned that what's whispered in comfort often echoes louder than what's shouted in anger, she penned. The question is not whether someone meant harm, but why they felt they could say it to begin with. It struck like lightning. Commentators endlessly quoted it. Editorials were written in response, and it became a topic of discussion in classrooms, on podcasts, and in think tanks. Not for its drama, but because it resonated deeply, striking a universal nerve. Meanwhile, Melania's silence grew heavier, not because people anticipated a feud, but because some began to question her very sincerity about civility. Behind the scenes, the White House communications team held emergency sessions, debating whether the First Lady should address it publicly. Some advised a brief clarification. Others insisted on complete silence, confident it would simply fade. Ultimately, they chose silence. But silence, when an entire nation is listening, can sound devastatingly like confirmation. In Texas, Jasmine's district phone lines rang incessantly for 3 days. Most calls were supportive, some were hostile, a few outright threatening. But what stood out most were the messages from young women across the country. "You gave us language for what we always felt but didn't know how to say." More than anything, this sustained Jasmine. She hadn't sought this fight, but she refused to abandon it. Yet this was far from over. Both women were soon to be scheduled for the same private event, and this time there would be no microphones. The invitation arrived discreetly. A private dinner in Dallas, hosted by the Harrington Foundation, a well-funded, nonpartisan organization renowned for its exclusive political retreats. Attendance was strictly by personal invitation, no cameras, no press, just conversation. Melania Trump had attended twice before. Jasmine Crocket had never been invited until now. The event was set at the Dallas Arboretum, within a grand hall usually reserved for lavish weddings and donor galas. 50 guests, assigned tables, assigned talking points. The organizers professed a desire to foster meaningful dialogue, but everyone understood this was networking at its zenith, power operating behind closed doors. Jasmine arrived early, dressed in a dark green gown and low heels. She hadn't brought Dion this time. No staff, just herself. She was weary of everyone asking if she needed assistance entering rooms she had already rightfully earned her place in. Melania arrived 20 minutes later, flanked by 2 aides, but no visible Secret Service. She wore a champagne-colored blouse and an elegant long skirt. Her expression, as always, inscrutable. They were seated at different tables, yet disturbingly close, 2 tables apart. Jasmine noticed immediately. The keynote speaker, a former ambassador, delivered polite, measured words about restoring unity. Applause. Dinner was served. Wine sipped. Familiar laughter echoed. But the temperature shifted when Jasmine rose to excuse herself during dessert. She walked quietly to the corridor near the restrooms, and moments later, Melania followed. They were utterly alone. The hallway was dim, adorned with framed photographs of past events. The hum of conversation from the main room muffled behind double doors. Melania broke the silence first. "You wrote very beautifully," she said, her voice devoid of its earlier sharp edge, just calm. Jasmine turned. "Thank you." A pause. Melania looked directly at her. "You believe I threatened you." "I believe you said what you meant," Jasmine countered. Melania nodded slowly once. "I meant to say, be cautious. This is a dangerous space, and words have power." Jasmine stepped closer. "And yet your words came when the cameras were off. That's the part that matters." "You don't know what it's like," Melania said, her tone softening, "to have every move watched, judged, twisted." Jasmine exhaled a small breath through her nose. "Ido. But the difference is, I've never had the privilege of silence being seen as grace." Melania's eyes lingered for a moment, Not angry, not defensive, just still. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, "but I'm not sorry for saying it." "Then you meant it," Jasmine replied. Another pause. Then Melania uttered something Jasmine hadn't anticipated. "I admire you," she said quietly, "even if I disagree with your methods." Jasmine tilted her head. "That's not the word I thought you'd use." "I admire what I can't do," Melania continued. "You speak without fear. I was taught to survive by choosing silence." The air between them transformed. No warmth, but less tension. Just two women, each misunderstood in their own ways by the public, by each other, by the very system they navigated. "I'm not fearless," Jasmine confessed. "I just learned that silence doesn't protect people like me." Melania nodded slowly, as if hearing that truth for the very first time. They didn't embrace, didn't shake hands. They simply stood for a prolonged moment, both burdened by unspoken truths that couldn't be uttered in front of anyone else. Then, Melania turned and walked back towards the ballroom. Jasmine followed a minute later. At their respective tables, nothing outwardly seemed different, yet something profound had shifted. Later that night, neither woman issued a statement. No leaks, no tweets, just a silence that for once felt mutually understood. The internet buzzed for days with speculation about their encounter, rumors flying, articles hypothesizing, but no one possessed the true story. Only they knew what had transpired, and for now, that was enough. As the world continued to dissect the hot mic moment, deeper questions began to surface. What did this incident reveal about the way society treated disagreement and the immense power bestowed upon silence? It had transcended a mere gaffe. The clip had been meticulously analyzed, parroted, condemned, defended, and even re-edited into cinematic montages online. But beneath the superficial noise, people began to probe why it had resonated so deeply in the first place. Why had one whispered sentence struck harder than weeks of televised debates? Perhaps it was because it tore back the curtain on a truth universally acknowledged, yet rarely admitted. What is said offstage often holds more weight than what is performed for the camera. For weeks, conversations blossomed in unexpected places, far removed from the usual political discourse. In a hair salon in Glendale, Arizona, two women in their 60s debated whether Melania's whisper had been motherly or manipulative. In a Madison, Wisconsin classroom, a high school teacher used Jasmine's op-ed as a springboard for a civics discussion on intent versus impact. On an Omaha podcast, two brothers pondered, why do we expect women to be silent, polite, or dangerous, but never both? For every opinion, there was a profound reflection. People saw themselves reflected in both women, sometimes simultaneously. The composed one, the outspoken one, the one who chose silence to avoid trouble, the one who spoke up knowing trouble would inevitably follow. Beyond personalities, the story peeled back layers to reveal a deeper issue: the intricate dynamics of power. Melania had navigated the shadows of powerful men for years, preferring poise over confrontation, mastering the art of wielding influence without direct challenge. That had been her shield. Jasmine, conversely, had fought her way into every room, often told her tone was too much, her presence uncomfortable. Her voice was not merely her power, it was her very shield. So, when one whispered to the other, it wasn't just personal, it was generational, cultural, political, structural. And America listened. The media, as it always does, eventually moved on. Another scandal, another election. But something lingered. That clip kept resurfacing, not as breaking news, but as a silent, potent reference point. People would say, it's another hot mic moment, and everyone understood its true implications. Universities hosted panels on coded language in politics. Nonprofits incorporated Jasmine's op-ed into their leadership trainings. And within political circles, the phrase, "be careful who you call out," became a quiet inside joke, imbued with chillingly real meaning. But what truly endured was the transformative conversation the moment sparked. It forced a confrontation with something far more subtle than party lines or political slogans. It compelled people to examine how they communicated when they believed no one was listening, and more importantly, what they revealed about themselves when they thought they were in complete control. Angela Russo, the editor who had unleashed the clip, departed WNYT a month later. She never publicly confirmed her role. She didn't need to. But in a quiet blog post published under a pseudonym, she wrote, "Sometimes the most honest thing you can do is let people hear each other." As for Jasmine, she continued to speak, not louder, not angrier, just steadier. Her next speech on the House floor referenced no one directly, but ended with a line that reverberated across social media. "My voice may bother some, but I wasn't elected to whisper." Melania, for her part, never again addressed the incident. She resumed her meticulously curated schedule, speaking engagements, school visits, photo opportunities. But those close to her noted a subtle change. She had grown quieter in private, not regretful, just more guarded. And perhaps that was the profound takeaway. The moment didn't shatter careers or escalate into a public feud, but it brutally exposed the fragility of perception and the desperate human need for control. For power isn't merely about what you say. It's about when you say it, how you say it, and who hears you when you are convinced no one will. Even now, the haunting question persists. What should be done with the truths overheard behind closed doors? Months bled into memory. The frenzy surrounding the clip eventually subsided. News cycles surged forward, elections loomed, and the country shifted its gaze, as it always does. But the impact remained. For many, the story became a visceral lesson, not just in politics, but in presence, in what it means to occupy a space where you are neither expected nor desired, and what it means to respond, not merely react. There are no official apologies, no grand public reconciliations. Yet, both women had left an indelible mark, not with volume, but with chilling clarity. And that was what truly resonated. In homes across America, particularly in communities that often felt dismissed or ignored, Jasmine Crockett's words became more than a soundbite. They became an anchor. A high school girl in Toledo quoted her in her student council speech. A grandmother in Sacramento kept her op-ed clipped to her refrigerator. A pastor in Birmingham rewrote one of his sermons, incorporating Jasmine's line, "I will not change because of power or position." It was no longer about celebrity or drama. It was about the profound resonance of truth. Because undeniably, we're all caught in conversations we did not initiate, in workplaces, in classrooms, in families. Conversations where someone utters something just quiet enough to feign innocent intent, yet pointed enough that we know it was meant for us. It could be a comment in a meeting, a joke at the dinner table, a whisper designed to remind you of your designated place. And the agonizing question becomes, what do you do with that? Do you ignore it, laugh it off, confront it? Or do you, like Jasmine, seize that insidious whisper and transmute it into something far louder, not in decibels, but in unshakable value? The story of Melania's microphone transcended mere politics. It became a chilling testament to how quickly a whisper can travel when the world is finally primed to listen. It was about the subtle, insidious ways power attempts to perpetuate itself, and the quiet, unyielding resistance that blossoms when people refuse to shrink in response. And whether one sided with Melania or Jasmine, whether one perceived one as composed and the other as confrontational, or vice versa, the most crucial outcome was the very existence of the conversation itself. Because true change doesn't always erupt from a speech bellowed from a podium. Sometimes it begins with someone simply saying, "I heard that, and I'm not going to let it slide." So, let this be the chilling takeaway. If you have ever been silenced, second-guessed, or told your tone was the problem, remember that your voice matters, now more than ever. If you have ever observed someone speaking in coded language and wondered, was that for me? You're most likely correct. And if you have ever been tempted to whisper something you wouldn't dare utter aloud, ask yourself why you are saying it at all. Let this moment serve as a stark reminder that true strength doesn't cower behind false politeness. It speaks with unwavering purpose, and it stands fearlessly in truth, even when it is profoundly inconvenient. For power built on silence is ephemeral, but voice that is lasting. That is how change begins.